Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. In the chat box, if you have not already done so, please type your name and organization. I'm Erik Budd, your facilitator for today, as well as the developer and lead instructor for the current IQI Academy for Quality Management Fundamentals. At IQI, our mission is to inspire learning, share successes, and spark the energy and courage to lead our organizations to continually improve and innovate. We are a 30-year leader in teaching a system of profound knowledge. The IQI Board of Directors consists of Sigrid Adams, Kathy Adcock, myself, Justin King, Frank Murdoch, Heidi Nielsen, and our chair, Terry. We also have an advisory board that includes Adrian Bass, Ken Glickman, Bill Knapp, Tina Miller, Nancy Schertzing, Tammy Slavic, and Paige Thompson. The IQI Academy is one of the many programs offered by IQI. I will give you a brief overview of how the IQI Academy works, and then we will enjoy our capstone presentations. President John F. Kennedy said, "Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other." Over the years, we have observed three primary benefits for leaders and organizations who send their people to the IQI Academy: development of leadership mindset, approaches, and skills in future leaders; identification and preparation of people for added leadership responsibilities; improvement of organizational outcomes. How does one learn to become a more effective leader of people, of processes and systems, of changes that produce improvements? How does one get noticed, recognized, and acknowledged as the leader you are and as the leader you could be? Everything that matters takes place on the court. Your IQI Academy project is an excellent vehicle for this because it puts you in action immediately. It provides the source of current knowledge to which you will connect and better retain new knowledge. It enables the learning that only occurs when you attempt to cause change, because if you truly want to understand something, try to change it. Your Academy project helps develop the non-declarative knowledge and memories based upon experiences that cannot be taught or transferred. And it creates leadership experiences and skills resulting from producing cooperative, interdependent work. The first and primary source of learning for developing leaders is your organization. Projects are selected from the work processes in which each participant works and upon which they have some influence. Project selection criteria ensures successful projects. The criteria used are frequency of activity, support from others, freedom to take action, the need for IT resources, and the need or opportunity to learn. Even though we work remotely, our sessions include many opportunities to interact with and learn from each other. Brian Chiselski of Michigan Rehabilitation Services says, other trainings tend not to have the same level of depth. He added, the standout difference between the IQI Academy and other trainings is the amount of hands-on doing and analyzing of each step. Participants in the IQI Academy often join us believing that they have neither the resources nor the time to produce worthwhile change in their organization. One of the most frequently heard reasons for not engaging in transformational or improvement activity is, I don't have enough time. Our perceptions of time are malleable and context-driven. We can spend hours on a task only to have it feel as if minutes have passed, and the opposite can occur. Sometimes it requires simply a commitment to make something a part of your day. Waiting for the time to become available will find you waiting a very long time. The learning environments that we work within are nothing like the kind and predictable learning environments we experience in sports or games like chess. We work in learning environments that have been described as wicked. Learning methods that comprehend this fact are needed. The broad, multidisciplinary perspectives provided by the leadership teachings of W. Edwards Deming are what is called for. All of the 14 points provide management wisdom. Participants learn, share, and evaluate how their organization's practices align with each of these points. Application of all 4 areas of the system of profound knowledge is integrated into weekly learning and improvement cycles. Leaders and managers from various industries know the beneficial effects that come from understanding and applying the system of profound knowledge. Some even go so far as to say Deming's teachings are the path to ending suffering in the workplace. The 4 areas of the system of profound knowledge are appreciation for a system, from which we learn that effective management of a system requires knowledge of the interrelationships between all the components within the system and of the people who work in it. Understanding variation. There is valuable information to be extracted from variation. Most managers are unaware of how to perceive or make use of this information. The theory of knowledge helps us understand that management in any form is prediction. Plans, agendas, standard work processes, and work rules are all management predictions. It is possible to perform better as a manager when you learn to apply the theory of knowledge to your management predictions. Psychology helps us to understand people and their numerous interactions. Good management will apply an understanding of psychology to support joy in work and to nurture people's innate positive attributes. These 4 areas of the system of profound knowledge form the basis of the IQI Academy, which is structured to introduce you to and to provide you practice in all of the areas of the system of profound knowledge. During Unit 1, participants are introduced to the system of profound knowledge and the 14 points for management. They also begin their on-the-court learning experiences through weekly learning and improvement plan, do, study, act cycles, daily teach to learn conversations, and a course-long theory of knowledge mind mapping activity. Our study of the voice of the customer includes an introduction to the concept of the customer's job to be done as a more useful perspective than customer needs. We learn about the 6 voice of the customer system gaps that exist in every organization. Our exploration of each participant's chain of customers provides deeper understanding of how our work fits into the products and services that the organization delivers. Learning to see the organization as an interdependent group of elements that need to work together to successfully serve external customers leads us to focusing upon how well we interact and work with each other rather than how well we perform independently. We learn that customers and suppliers are important parts of our system and should appear on our representations of that system. Interactions, cooperation, aim, and purpose become primary areas of management focus. We cannot become good, effective process managers until we understand variation. Each participant learns how to use data from their project to create a control chart. They then learn how to interpret and respond to the signals on their control charts by learning to distinguish between sources of common cause and special cause variation. Participants join the rare group of managers who can appropriately address variation in their systems, taking actions that produce improvement and avoid tampering. A wide variety of factors, psychological and otherwise, are examined through an in-depth look at what we often describe as individual performance and performance feedback. These include motivation, joy in work, fear in the workplace, stress, red beads, the 90-30 rule, as well as approaches to address system and measurement issues. These are all integrated into each participant's idealized redesign of a performance feedback process. Our final unit focuses on the true source of transformation. The essence of this concept is captured in a quote from David Langford, one of this Academy's guest instructors. He said, "Change starts at the top. I am the top of something." This lesson is the focus of all of our work in the IQI Academy. Transformation of any kind begins with us, with how we perceive, how we think about, and how we act in the world. We begin our project work with the 3 basic questions. The 3 basic questions are designed to establish the foundation for generating tests of changes aimed at improvement. They are, what are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that a change is an improvement? And what moves can we make that will result in improvement? The only source of improvement is movement. To improve something, you must move something. We practice learning how to make moves that produce improvement by completing weekly plan, do, study, act, learning, and improvement cycles. PDSA learning and improvement cycles are one of the 3 most powerful on-the-court learning methods used in the IQI Academy. Participants design and run at least 1 PDSA cycle each week with the intention of producing the learning that precedes improvement. We come to learn that at least 4 to 5 cycles are required before useful changes leading to improvement are produced. Our organizations are powerful, interconnected networks of people. In the Academy, participants begin to learn ways in which they can have a positive influence on those networks. Teaching as an individual learning method is well known. It supports learning activities such as retrieval, elaboration, and practice. There is an accumulative effect that results from asking course participants to sustain a daily practice of teaching what they are learning to at least 7 to 10 different individuals during each unit of the Academy. After the morning session, participants teach a key topic to someone in their social or work network. They follow up by documenting what they, the Academy participant, learned by teaching the concept. At the end of the Academy, each person has recorded notes from close to 50 teach-to-learn conversations with others. They experience strengthened interpersonal relationships with coworkers. The organization's social network benefits from the new knowledge and exploration of ideas occurring each day. Individuals learn, and the critical mass required for organizational transformation grows. Notes from the daily conversation with another person records what was taught and what was learned by participants as they attempted to teach a single concept. This is a representation of the teach-to-learn conversations that one of our participants held during our current Academy. When we teach others, we are not only learning more deeply about a concept or theory related to improvement and transformation, we are altering the network of conversations within which we work and live. We create the transformation networks that make a positive difference for our organizations. This is what gets created when we teach and apply. Even though our current cohort is small in number, they have had a valuable influence in their organizations. They have held over 320 teach-to-learn conversations with over 134 different people on important management topics, methods, and concepts. Again, although our primary purpose of daily teach-to-learn conversations is to improve learning and retention by participants, their organizational and social networks are also significantly benefited from the knowledge that these conversations introduce into those networks. The IQI Academy is 6 integrated units, each consisting of 8 to 10 45-minute live, remotely taught weekday sessions. Most units have some pre-work assignment, including developing and updating answers to the 3 basic questions. There are multiple in-class exercises, as well as occasional assignments that are completed with coworkers. As discussed, each participant conducts daily teach-to-learn conversations. Participants' work projects are the basis for weekly Plan, Do, Study, Act learning cycles. Kind words are often shared about the course and participant experiences. One Academy graduate wrote to me this past year to say, "I'm going to school now to get my master's in education and instructional design. I think that the Academy is one of the best design courses I have ever been a part of." Monica Robbins said this in her capstone presentation. Tiffany Nguyen states that the principles and concepts she learned in the IQI Academy will probably be used throughout her career. We are fortunate to frequently have guest instructors share their knowledge and expertise with us. During our current academy, we were fortunate to be instructed by Christopher Chapman, Bernadette Johnson, David Langford, Mary King, and Heidi Nielsen. You may register today for the next IQI Academy, which starts on January 18th. For the quickest responses to requests for more information, including receipt of course pre-work, please contact me using the information on the screen. Email me using Erik at qualityandinnovation.org. And for calling or text, use 248-505-0563. Our capstone presentations provide an opportunity for participants to report on how they navigated the course, what they chose to learn, and what they are committed to doing after their IQI Academy experience. This is our sequence of presenters today. First up is Tyler Gross. Good morning, Tyler. And just a heads up to each of our presenters, you're automatically on mute, so you'll have to unmute yourself as we proceed. It's all yours, Tyler.
Thank you, Erik. My name is Tyler Gross. I'm a technician with the Business Network Division of Michigan Rehabilitation Services, which is part of the state of Michigan's Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. More on MRS in just a minute and what we do. I'm going to start out with a quote from Deming. You're asking me to go on memory now, Erik. I was on that first slide there. We should work on our process, not the outcome of our processes, which I think is a good summary of the teachings of Deming in this lesson, or in this academy. You can go now. So for my agenda today, I'm going to first talk about MRS and my project, then what I've learned through the academy, third, my commitments or plans for the future, and then fourth, reflect on my academy experience. So first up, I'm going to talk about MRS and my project. I'm not going to dwell too long on the system diagram here, but I just want to point out a couple things. One, the aim represented in that top right yellow oval. The aim of MRS is to develop customized services for businesses and individuals with disabilities in order to promote a diverse and inclusive workforce. And this is in support of Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So moving down to box 2, you see our customers are individuals with disabilities. This could be adults with or without employment, youth and students. And the agency also serves businesses to support employment of individuals with disabilities. And that's the side of the agency I work on, the business services team, which is the Business Network Division. And moving left to box 3, you see the staff is composed of consultants, counselors, occupational therapists, rehabilitation specialists, which provide these services. And then in the fourth box, again to the left, I'm not going to name all the services, but the services the agency provides both to individuals and businesses are diverse. I would consider myself somewhere in box 7, which is, again, moving to the left and lower. Most of what I provide is administrative support and tech support to the unit. I do data reporting based on the services that are provided to businesses from the agency. So what I learned in creation of a system diagram like this is compare this type of visual representation to an organizational chart. What does an organizational chart tell you? Hierarchy, who reports to who? Not much beyond that. This sort of system diagram positions everyone, all the components of the system, in relation to the aim of the system, which is a helpful learning and understanding exercise. You can advance, Erik. Thanks. Next, I'm going to talk about the process represented by 3 rows here. I being the technician on the top row, our consultants in the middle, and managers on the bottom. First, services are provided to businesses by the consultants. And then second, these services are documented in a computer application called MyBRS, or the Michigan Business Resource System. I assist consultants with that if needed, generally not. Generally, they know exactly what to do in the system. Well, kind of exactly. More on that in a little bit. I take the data from MyBRS and I generate reports in step 3. And then in step 4, these reports are provided to managers to review activities of employees and business services that are provided. And then 5th, these reports, after being reviewed by managers and consultants, are used in performance evaluation, division review, and strategic planning going forward. What I learned about in creating this process flowchart is what my role is in the process. It's easy to see reports as existing in the abstract as either in support of federal reporting responsibilities or internal controls, but this clearly positions them as something that can provide consultants and managers information to understand their recent actions and inform future actions. You can go to next slide. This is the customer chain. You can see I'm represented on the left as the technician, providing the reports in business services data to managers, which then filters to consultants, and then both of our dual customers, both businesses and clients. And I'm not going to dwell too long on the specifics here. You can read the chart. But what I learned through this is that the data work that I do is connected through a chain of action to the services that our agency provides business customers. So like I said, it can be tempting just to see the data reporting as a federal reporting requirement or a measure of internal control, but it also supports delivery of services to our customers through a chain of interactions demonstrated by this. So my project is how is data entered into MyBRS and how can we do so more consistently across consultants? How can we make data entry timely? And how can it be done in ways that contribute to the system aim of employment of individuals with disabilities? You can move to the next slide. So moving on from MRS and my project info, we're going to cover some of the key items that I've learned throughout this IQI Academy. You can advance. The first is sources of variation, how to identify them, and strategies to respond. So what you're looking at here is what would exist previously on an individual report that was provided to consultants and managers. Each one of the vertical bars represents a consultant that provides services to businesses within the business network division. The green bar would be the consultant that I was handing this report to. You can see it's anonymous amongst their peers, but it is direct comparison to their peers. So why is this type of report incorrect? Through the Academy, I've learned that this type of comparison to others is bad in a number of ways. 1, it encourages competition rather than collaboration. 2, it increases anxiety and stress amongst staff members. 3, it replaces intrinsic motivation to perform their jobs well with an extrinsic motivation of a simple numerical value. And 4th, perhaps most importantly, it ignores the system. It assumes that we can improve individual performance just by someone trying harder or wanting to be better than their peers, ignoring the systematic influences that produce that individual's output. So you can advance again, Erik. This is another example. You can advance one more time of a report or a feature of an individual report that would have been prior to me taking the Academy. You can see a simple performance indicator tracked over time, month by month. What's wrong with something like this? 1, it has no statistical controls. What do I mean by that? There is no way to determine if the system is stable. And by that, I mean whether the variation we see is common cause, so many factors contributing a small amount of variation, present in every system, none significantly more variant than the other ones. Or whether the causes are special cause variation, so a single cause that temporarily disturbs the process and has a pronounced effect. There's no way to make that sort of distinction just looking at a simple time plot. And 2, it encourages reaction to the latest data. So a natural way to read this type of chart is to look at the most recent data plot and look what is it compared to the last month, compared to this month of last year. And those types of comparisons on a month-to-month basis do nothing to expose the causes of the variation, whether they're common or special cause, and the systematic influences that are at play in creating this type of data. So moving forward, these are changes that I'm going to make in how this type of information is presented to consultants and managers. First, you'll see it is a time plot over time, but instead of an individual or the entire division, it's the Southeast, so regionalized. I've created a mean, so an average data point that runs across the middle, that's that black line, and then upper and lower control limits. You can advance one more time to see the math on how those control limits are created. Pretty simple. It uses the variation in the system to create what we would expect to be the upper and lower bounds of common cause variation in the system. So any data point occurring within those lines, it's indicative of, not always, but it is indicative of a of common cause variation. But something that exceeds could point towards special cause, which has its own set of responses that we can manage by. So why make this change? As I just indicated, it's a way to determine special cause from common cause variation in a way that's not just reacting to the latest data point. You can advance twice more, Erik. And as you'll see on this chart, there are two instances of special cause variation. One, the obvious one, it exceeds the upper control limit on the 1 point. That would prompt a manager to investigate what's going on here that caused this special cause variation. And then we know we can respond to that by plotting timely data, containing the problem, searching for causes, developing more permanent remedies. There's also a second point of special cause variation, which is 8 consecutive points below the mean. There's a handful of different tests that we can use to determine special cause variation. I'm not going to dive too far in depth, but that's the basic idea. Provide managers a tool to distinguish what type of variation they're looking at and take appropriate responses given that type of variation. You can advance to the next, Erik. Another thing that I've learned that I want to highlight from the Academy is the importance of operational definitions. Through PDSA cycles 2 and 7, I shadowed and surveyed consultants respective to those PDSA cycles and found that how consultants document certain actions, how they treat collaborators entering late data, meeting new business contacts, unresponsiveness from business contacts, how they document that in the computer application is different between consultants. So moving forward, I plan to continue to work with consultants and run PDSA cycles to get a better understanding of what operational definitions we could form to guide user actions through these gray areas or these edge cases. And the idea is this will create less common cause variation and reduce those upper and lower control limits that we saw on the previous control chart. Yeah, please advance. I think 2 more times here. As Deming says, an operational definition is one that people can do business with. It includes a method of evaluating, it is repeatable, and it is agreed upon by all parties. So we need to come to shared understandings, operational definitions of what is a service project? When do I open one? When do I close one? When do I choose this service over this service? And so that's what I'm going to be working toward moving forward. You can advance it. So what are my plans for my future with MRS using this information that I've learned in IQI Academy? You can advance. My commitments for learning are, I think there are 3 items here. You can just reveal them all, Erik. Yeah, thank you. So starting in our operational team next week, I'm going to experiment with different control chart groupings, continuing to stratify, disaggregate data where appropriate, if it's common cause, to get a greater insight into what I'm looking at in the data and the sources of variation with more specific groupings. By 6/1, the start of June, I want to, between now and then, continue to explore BS consultant practices and preferences to work towards successful operational definitions that we can do business with. And then weekly, always PDSA, 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 short, rapid cycle learning opportunities. For my project, I'm committing to providing control charts. The first one will be on the first quarter of fiscal year. I know, confusing, fiscal year in state government. And that'll be 2 weeks after the end of January. So 1/14, I would generate the reports for that first quarter, provide it to operational team and staff, and then have the operational definitions ready to go by the start of June through my experimentation between now and then, so that when we roll it out we're expanding the use of this application to all consultants statewide. So part 2 of the Southeast Division rollout, those will be ready to go, complete with user manual and tutorial videos. And those are some of the moves I've speculated that I will make to get there. You can advance, Erik. And then commitments for organization. So I haven't talked about this part with managers, so I'm going to keep it vague right here, but experiment with new methods of evaluation. We talked in the course about different ways to do employee evaluation. In state of Michigan, we're kind of bound by certain practices, but there are flexibility that we can do within our division and how managers are interacting with staff, including myself, with evaluation. So I'd like to experiment with some of those moving forward if my managers are willing. And then bi-weekly, starting next week, spread PDSA methodology by integrating plan, do, study, act, complete with prediction and analysis of prediction. And that's in operational team and the strategic focus groups that I'm a part of. So a reflection of my academy experience, the last part here, my main takeaways. First, transformation of a system begins with transformation of the individual. This was definitely true in my case. I'm the type of person that likes to plan things out meticulously. If I'm going to take the first step, I like to know what the second, third, fourth, final step of that process is going to be. I found that's fairly incompatible with the IQI method of learning and PDSA cycles. You need to be willing to take a first step, not knowing what the answer is going to be. You make a prediction. Sometimes your prediction's wrong. You learn from those things even when you're wrong, and then you plan the next step. You act based on what you learned in that PDSA cycle. So that has been a transformation of myself. Second is to focus on interactions and not on individuals. All individuals produce or act within a system, and focusing on individual output is often an ineffective management strategy rather than focused on how they're positioned within the system and how they interact with things around them within that system. And then third, the importance of prediction. As Deming says, the criterion for knowledge is that whether it helps us predict, not whether we discover truth, because there is not such a thing as discovering truth in the domain of empirical knowledge. And that is from management and is prediction. And then what is different about IQI Academy? First, the amount of work, no sugarcoating it. This often feels more like a college course than it does your typical professional development course. That's a good thing though. It's regular opportunities to learn. There's a lot of content, hands-on application, and to Erik, the instructor's credit, he puts in more work than us in truly coming to understand our projects, our organizations, and is really insightful in the feedback that he provides. So credit there where it's due. Second, that the course is focused on the development, not just of the individual, but of the organization. Oftentimes in professional development, you'll go, this is how you write better. This is how you develop this particular skill, you individual. This course is focused on how do we improve the organizations of which we're a part. So that's a fundamentally different way to approach professional development. And then third, the course is a dialogue. It's taught through the Socratic method, through conversation between instructor and participants. The conversations we have in the very course itself is shaped by the conversations that we have in the course, which I think is refreshing. It's not just someone talking to you every single morning for 45 minutes. It is a conversation that occurs. And I imagine if an IQI Academy happened next time, the conversations that took place would be dependent on the people in the cohort and the systems that they're a part of, and it would change to suit the people that were participating. Last, speaking of Teach to Learns, as Erik did, I participated with 25 different people in my Teach to Learns in advance. Most were within MRS, some were outside of MRS, and this covered 48 different topics of conversation. A lot of these folks are in this online meeting right now, so thank you to those people who participated in my learning throughout the academy. And then last, as Erik mentioned, we have this theory of knowledge mind map. You can see on the left here, I'm not much of an artist, so I'm not going to go through my whole mind map there. I tried to scrunch things in where I could. I'm going to just highlight one quote. It says, finding patterns in any data-rich environment is easy. That's what mediocre gamblers do. The key is determining where patterns represent signal and noise. And that phrase has kind of since become famous in the stats policy world from Nate Silver. He goes on to say, making predictions based on our beliefs is the best and perhaps even the only way to test ourselves. So, Nate Silver, 538, kind of polling analysis fame. If he hasn't read Deming, he's definitely been exposed to the ideas and come to incorporate some of them himself. So in conclusion, I want to say thank you all for listening to me this morning, to the MRS folks who encouraged me to take this course and provided the opportunity, and then to our instructor, Erik, and the cohort that I participated in the academy with. It's been a great experience. So thank you very much.
Excellent job, Tyler. Thank you very much. If you check the chat box, you've got a bunch of fans out there already supporting what you just shared with us. Thank you. Hillary Evans will be our next presenter. Good morning, Hillary.
Good morning. I don't know how I'm expected to follow Tyler, but here it goes anyway. Hi, everyone. My name is Hillary Evans, and I am a research associate at LabCorp in Ann Arbor. Today, I'll be talking about my IQI experience, focusing on what I learned, the challenges I faced, and some examples of exercises from the course. I will go over the 3 basic questions in PDSA regarding my project, the theory of knowledge, and my commitments coming out of the course. Excuse me, sorry. I chose to experience IQI and put my best effort into learning. I have not been through a learning course like this before, so the concepts were all new to me, as was this experience. Through IQI, I added to my mind map using quotes from each session. Although this is not a pretty representation, but this was a way for me to apply the knowledge that I gained from each session. After each session, I was able to reflect and add to my mind map based on what I learned. By brainstorming and structuring the ideas I generated, it allowed me to retain what I learned. This was a good visual representation of what I learned, and it gave me the opportunity to see how some of these ideas were interconnected. So what I resisted, making a change. And by that, I mean in terms of what do I change? What do I have the authority to change? What differences could I make? These were questions that I asked myself as I was brainstorming project ideas for IQI. I was hesitant to choose a project since I was not sure what impact I could make. At the beginning, I really resisted having the daily teach to learn conversations. First of all, I felt that I would be intrusive on others and their time. I'm a quiet person, and having these conversations with so many different people was out of my comfort zone, especially when trying to talk about topics that are new or a different way of thinking and something I may not completely understand. I also resisted completing the exercises. The exercises were intended for me to open my mind and train myself to think in a different way. And I had to be willing to put in extra effort to completing them in order to practice these concepts. So it challenged me. Coming into the course, I had no idea what I would learn, the challenges I would face, or the large commitment that was expected of me. My initial expectations were thought to be involved during each session and some occasional exercises. I had no idea that I would be so involved and be such a large time commitment. This was especially challenging for me, not only because I had personal things I was dealing with, but handling my workload as well. Time management. So right from the beginning, I realized I had to schedule my time very carefully in order to complete the assignments, conduct daily teach to learn conversations, and maintain my workload. I struggled with asking for help as I learned that I needed to rely heavily on my team so that I could dedicate more time toward IQI so I could get the most out of it. All through IQI, it was challenging to apply these new concepts to my project as I had to really stretch my way of thinking. I used some of my teach to learn conversations to pick other people's brains in order to help me generate ideas. My willingness to request support from others evolved over time. I learned this by scheduling my daily teach to learn conversations, asking for help with my PDSAs for my project, and help with my workload. Asking for help is not the most comfortable thing for me to do, so I gained confidence in this area as I received great support from my team as well as others. My willingness to accept support from others. I quickly learned that I was not going to be successful throughout IQI if I did not accept support. Knowing that others were so willing to provide whatever support I needed allowed me to focus on IQI so I can embrace my learning, gave me peace of mind. My willingness to learn with and from others. I really enjoy learning from others. I ask questions to learn. Perhaps I even ask too many questions. But by asking questions, not only do I learn, but we learn together. A deployment flowchart was created to show what happens within the process and who is involved. This flowchart was used to provide a visual representation in order to understand the process of my project and to determine potential moves that could be made to make an improvement. The flowchart changed as my project progressed and new tools were integrated into the process. Over the course of IQI, I updated the 3 basic questions about my project. These questions changed over time as I learned how to ask better questions that related to my project. The most challenging question for me was the first one. what are we trying to accomplish? Although the question seems like a simple one, I had to truly understand what I was trying to improve and what I could do to try to accomplish it. I learned to avoid the forbidden words in order to measure if a testable change is an improvement or not, and determine which moves I think would make an improvement. From these questions, I conducted several PDSAs making testable predictions. The predictions evolved as I learned through each of my PDSAs. One of my early PDSAs, I learned that my ideas for improvement may not always be useful for the entire team. So for example, I made a study checklist to keep track of the study progress. It was implemented, but not everyone will use it. Many of my PDSAs involved formulas within an Excel file used specifically by the flow cytometry team for client studies. Each of these were tested by another team member. I learned that it is not necessarily the formula itself that needs to be tested, but there could be other observations or suggestions that could be gained by having someone else perform the test rather than just me doing it myself. Could there be a better way to perform the calculations? Is it necessary or is it even helpful? Are all the pieces considered? Those sorts of things. The PDSA plan pictured here was one specifically where I learned from a colleague and some improvements that could be made to the formulas that were being tested. Through conducting several PDSAs to test my predictions, I learned that I gained more knowledge by asking the team about my ideas first. Each PDSA I learned from the previous one throughout my project, and ultimately my project had to change since my learning then became limited. Although I initially resisted doing the teach to learns, as I previously mentioned, I enjoyed learning from my peers and family. My teach learn conversations changed into more of discussions rather than just me fumbling through a newly taught concept. I use these conversations as a time to ask questions about how they understood or viewed the concept. Some of them, I even worked through some of the exercises. By doing this, I was able to gain even more perspective of the concepts I was going to try to teach and ultimately learn. As I previously mentioned, my project had to change. So based on several teach to learn conversations, I learned that several teams within in vitro services were experiencing similar concerns that my team was facing. I decided I would use this as an opportunity to broaden the scope of my project and involve other departments. One of the exercises was to complete a customer chain. Naturally, my initial reaction when hearing the term customer, I thought about our clients. However, a customer can be anyone within a process and has a different job to be done. Understanding who our customer is, their interactions, and job to be done are all vital to understanding the system. Variation exists everywhere. Control charts are a good way to plot data over time to determine common or special causes of variation. Using control charts to determine the cause of variation and how it affected the system was probably one of my favorite topics of discussion. The reason being that by being able to determine what type of variation exists within the system and how to make improvements to reduce them would be beneficial to our processes. This is a system diagram of the Ann Arbor site from my perspective. I learned that without an aim, there is no system. Each component within that system is working toward the same aim. It is not each component individually, but their interactions that contribute to accomplishing that aim. This was a good way for me to take a look at the company to determine how each component fits into the system. Without each of the components, the system would not exist as they are all contributors. The results that I produced are better questions to ask. Using questions to come up with new questions and using those to test through a PDSA. PDSAs are not about proving my predictions were right, but to learn something about the process and strategize the next steps. The teach to learn conversations were intended for me to learn but it is my hope that my colleagues took away something from our discussions as well. While creating my guest list for this capstone presentation, I learned that you all were a huge part of my IQI Academy experience. I would like to formally thank each of you who have participated with me in my Teach to Learn conversations throughout the Academy. Also, thank you for your contributions to my PDSA work. I have learned much from each of you. When inviting you to attend this, I assumed everyone would be too busy and not have time for this as it is a big time commitment. However, I am overwhelmed by your support and appreciate you all for that. Thank you all for joining today to support me. So my commitments and dates that I've set for myself in order for me to continue learning. I signed up for some developmental courses on Learning Path. These courses are about leadership ID, and I'm curious about how much similarities I will find based on what I've learned throughout IQI. I will also be completing Unit 5 in April. My project commitments are to continue to meet with scientific development to identify new strategies to make improvements, test a proposed strategy, discuss the results, and see what we learn to develop the next steps. My commitments within the organization. Actually, since I had written this date, this has actually already happened. So I had joined the root cause analysis team. So I'm hoping to bring in understanding of variation to support making distinctions between the special causes and common causes of variations to that team. I would also like to integrate what I have learned to my team. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. Thank you to Erik and all the guest instructors in the Academy. Thank you all to my classmates and other participants for your contribution to my learning.
Hillary, that was excellent. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your contributions and for dealing with all the issues that you dealt with in order to continue your participation. Looking forward to hearing how your contributions in LabCorp work out over the next several months. So thank you. Rockey Myall is our next presenter. Good morning, Rockey.
Hey, good morning. And good morning to everyone else. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate everyone coming out and supporting our capstone presentations and supporting us throughout the IQI Academy. It has been quite the journey. It's been quite a struggle, and as with Hillary, I've really resisted. I tried to do whatever I needed to, but only what I needed to get through. And it's taking time now after the Academy for me to kind of digest. And you'll see a little bit of what I created and some of the examples of what I learned and what I did and where I'm at now 4 months after at the end of the Academy. I have 15 minutes, and for my practice, it's not going to take 15 minutes, so let's jump right in. This is the customer chain that I created. I didn't really see myself having much of a role as part of making things. I'm more support, but I realized I make a tagless, I used our laser cutter and make edge plates for a ink transfer printing machine that's done in cut component area. You can see the progression of those tagless labels from cut components from me to the end customer, a U.S. soldier, along the top. And at each level, the customer has a different job to be done regarding the tagless label. Through this process, I recognized quality as an important member in the value chain. The quality and legibility of our tagless labels and the system to ensure they are accurate are important to get the right item to the military personnel and to give them the information they need to get their job to be done. And my work at the start of the chain makes all that possible. And moving on now, Erik, to flowcharts. We were also asked to make simple flowcharts of 5 to 7 items. I chose 7. Here are 2 processes of flowcharts I created for Patagonia Repair. I didn't know if we were going to just focus on receiving process or the whole process, so I made 2. The one on the left is the receiving process that includes both Patagonia and Peckham, and the one on the right is the basic repair process at Peckham. We started off trying to make incremental improvements to Patagonia repair, but mapping out the entire process with my manager, Brett, showed that the in-house system used for performance measure and billing was too complex and cumbersome. Erik Budd came in and suggested we turn to a monthly service agreement and greatly simplify our billing process. We are currently working on this idea. We are also look to go from using and maintaining two databases, one to one, which is Patagonia's Salesforce database, and only one repair classification system. So we're making improvements to the system. I have to say, though, the repair information we're getting from our customers' database is also very complex. It's going to take some more out-of-the-box thinking for us to get to where we need to go. The system diagram, for this assignment, we were to identify the various parts and interactions within the system of our organization resides. By creating the system, what stood out to me afresh is that Peckham runs a business whose aim is to provide employment opportunities and services for people with disabilities and other barriers to employment. And it's not primarily to produce a good or service to be sold, even though we manufacture military wear. That is, and that there is two collaborating and sometimes competing systems, organizations, aspects within the system. So in here, you can kind of see at the top a lot of the actions associated with our aim and how it kind of intermingles with the different manufacturing processes. In some cases, our consumers are both the team members as well as military personnel. So very interesting organization that I'm working through. In control charts, a part of the class that I really enjoyed, and Tyler did a great job showing us how they are created and understanding how to use those control charts. Here are two control charts I created from a week of Patagonia repair data that is broken down into holes, zipper repairs, and zipper hole repairs. Here we have zipper holes pictured on the left and zippers on the right. The control charts show that zipper hole repairs is a stable process. That is, the process is within the upper and lower control limits and doesn't show any other abnormalities associated with unstable processes. But the zipper repairs are not stable, as can be seen by easily just by the points above the upper control limit on the right, and probably there are other issues with this data. The upper control limit for the zipper holes on the left is significantly higher than the one for zippers on the right, and the blue lines on each graph for the mean is also higher. Zipper repairs on the right have more data points, a lot more data points. We just do a lot more of them as compared to zipper holes, which we did 30 for that week. Zipper repairs include zipper sliders, which we can see at the bottom of the graph, that take about 5 minutes each. I thought if I eliminated them, maybe that would make the thing stable. It didn't make it any more stable. In fact, it made it worse. It actually made the mean go up, but the upper control limit came down. Very interesting phenomenon. And it shows that there is more to be learned. Okay. Plan, Do, Study, Act, or PDSA was a weekly component of the Academy. Of my 10 PDSA cycles, I chose to share with you the first one I did. The plan was to help repair technicians with recording their start and end times using a digital clock instead of an analog clock or their cell phone. This was eye-opening in two regards. First, I first learned how to set up a PDSA so that I could learn. It was very interesting how Erik told me how to set the clock so that only half the people could see it. And the other result was that it was so unexpected that it kind of blew my mind and helped me to learn that my thinking is kind of off. So turning to the next slide, I see that I really thought that the digital clock would help. And that the repair technicians who could not see the clock would ask for one. Well, the clock didn't change their behavior at all. They didn't say anything. In fact, unlike my prediction, no one said anything about the digital clock we installed when I had put a threshold of 2. 2 out of 12, and none, just crickets. Moving on, I had hyped this move, and well, it fell flat. And I learned, yes, I learned that what I think will work, it needs to be tested. It needs to be tried out and proven wrong or right before I know what I really learned and can move on to another PDSA. So moving on to the Teach to Learn. The Teach to Learn assignment after each class was a challenging aspect of the academy for me, as I had to reach out to my coworkers, and that was something I felt I was intruding on their time, and I had to teach something as well that I really did not know. I just heard. It stretched me and made me more open to striking up conversations. I got good at asking for help to complete my Teach to Learns and sharing the slides, the insights, the stories I was experiencing in the morning class. It opened up conversations and relationships. And now look and listen to, as I recite some memorable takeaways I have gained through the Teach to Learns I conducted. I learned to stop talking and to listen. I learned that persistence and a little luck pay off. So keep with it. I learned that sharing stories and your projects is really energizing, and we need that. I learned that people are interested in understanding a process, and a control chart is a great visual to help one understand. I learned trying to compete, get by, get noticed, pull ahead, which I was trying to do, was not bringing me joy, but frustration. I learned that red beads are often those issues that are not being addressed, that we have come accustomed to. Our perceptions and biases often keep us from entertaining or even recognizing solutions or even the need for a solution. I learned that even if we believe the change to be an improvement, it takes courage. We have to take that step. We got to step out and we have to move on. And so now my theory of knowledge mind map, which was a great assignment to help me to kind of visualize my thoughts. And you can see right now there's that at the center is the theory of knowledge pointing toward the future with the PDSA cycle around it. And that's really been the focus of my learning. And in summary, our mind is a work in progress. It is built on the foundation that was laid in the past and is moving us into the future. Much of what is written down, we have learned and heard from others. But it is our plans, our actions, our reflections, and our responses that determine if we move forward or remain where we are. That's kind of my statement for the IQI Academy and what I learned and what I'm taking from it. So my IQI Academy experience. How did I choose to experience the Academy? Well, I took it as a class, something I needed to do. And I incorporated my project. I attended the classes. I did the homework. And I tried. I tried hard to understand and to contribute and to reflect and to digest. But it takes time. And it was quite rigorous. And it was a lot of work. And it's very dense. As for how this learning experience has differed from others that I have had, well, the material was both broad and deep. The exercises were intentionally vague and thus challenging. I didn't know what he wanted. So I always try to figure it out with my other IQI Academy members. And I really have to thank Erik Budd. He really has each of us in mind when he writes and takes the time to give us individual feedback. He really asks insightful questions and makes us think and continues to push us forward. So that was the one part of the course that was really different from other instructors I've had. Those things that I've done during the academy that I have not done elsewhere. I spend time to myself most of the time, and I intentionally talked with people each day and shared what I was experiencing through the Teach to Learns again. I focused on process and also myself and the individual. So I learned that dichotomy that works together. I learned, this is my first course on W. Edwards Deming, Dr. Deming course. I had some background, but something new, and we learn incrementally, step by step. And my final slide, what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to reread the new economics and with a new, hopefully with new insights. And as I reread it, I'm going to be taking notes and thinking about my own learning and development and setting that into 3 basic questions. My project, I'm looking at a 2-tier service agreement, and yes, that's tomorrow, but that's not really a good date. But as soon as we get done with this, I'm pretty close to ready to present that to management team and look to create a control chart of that data from Patagonia's database and see how that looks. Doesn't look too pretty right now, but we're going to work on that. And for the organization, look to incorporate PDSAs and 3 basic questions in my area of influence. And from there, move on, hopefully, to grow it throughout the organization. So that is the end of my presentation. And I just want to thank everyone who has really worked with us and helped us through this project. And thanks, Harry, for just encouraging me. I got through. And everyone else, it's about over. So thank you so much.
Rockey, that was great. And your willingness to take on challenges that are uncomfortable to you really stood out. And it's clear that you have begun integrating the lessons that the IQI Academy presents into how you think and how you work. It's a great example, and I appreciate the work you've done. Erik Johnston is our next presenter. Good morning, Erik.
Good morning. Great job, Rockey. We did it, but it's also just the beginning. So my name's Erik Johnston. I'm the Operational Excellence Manager here at Peckham. I want to thank everybody for taking the time today. As I see the rest of the participants, giving their presentations, resistance seems to be a big, topic. And so, with this academy, at times the resistance that I was faced was, things weren't moving fast enough at times. And then at other times, things would come to a standstill for either a red bead becoming a boulder or just the system itself not being integrated to the way they need to be in order for improvements to be made. So, I'd like to start with our mind map, or my mind map, which is really a look into my mind. So these were different quotes and topics that came up. Is just, it really gave me the drive and the reminder every single day, to stay its course and to really be able to, know and pick out different things that could become, experiences within themselves. So a few of the ones, that became my mantras during the last 4 months is, management is prediction. And then the step between a collection of data and action is prediction. Learning is never complete and never perfect. Not knowing it was hard, but then knowing it was even harder. Structure determines behavior. Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. Curiosity becomes a potent strength, and reduced variation. So with that being said, variation was normal. However, there are 2 types of variation: the special cause and common cause. So when you look at the charts above, the trend lines show variation. However, with the control limits placed on the graph, you can start to recognize a difference between what type of variation there is within a process and system. The one on the top left, which is our silk customer delivery requirements, shows a variation that's common cause, meaning that any of that variation is normal. So the takeaway with that is it's a stable system and it's predictable. The same can hold true for one aspect of the purchasing side of initially being able to say, hey, we need something, let's place an order and of what's required. However, when you look at the process surrounding what comes next, the receipt of the fabric, you begin to see a different type of variation, a variation that's caused by special causes. There's a sawtooth, 6-point consecutives up and down. There's 8 points all under a median. And what that shows us is that that system and that process is unpredictable and unstable. And so for those reasons, I began to ask, what's causing this? As we move into this next slide, at the same time that this academy was starting, we were also going through a transition here within our manufacturing unit. At the same time and around the same time, we as a manufacturing leadership team began discussing core processes that we needed in the line of business. And so with that, I was able to place those within the different organization as a system. And what it does is it shows the interdependencies and the holistic view from all sides. The aim that was created, or one that I had put down before we had came up with the one, was we deliver satisfaction and meaningful work to both our internal and external customers by optimizing process, technology, and people. And I highlighted one aspect of material in the supplier management core process as just a reminder that I'll get into later on during this presentation. What you don't see in this is the individual departments, the purchasing, receiving, and warehouse, because when viewed separately, each function is technically doing their job. We need material, we order material, we receive material, we put away material. However, the impact of just doing that job without consideration for the entire process and the system leaves undue burden, stress, and fatigue throughout, as seen as the next couple of PDSAs and slides that were done. So as we talk about the PDSA cycle, so one of the first steps is, with that mantra, management is prediction. So let's put a PDSA around, understanding what's coming in, when it's coming in, and what that looks like. And so, as a reminder of that also is, that step between collection and data is the action is prediction. So there's a lot of predictions made, about that. Hey, if we put down, who the supplier is, the type of fabric that's coming in, we'll look at the silk, we'll look at the grid, we'll look at the yardage, we'll look at all these things. What we ended up seeing is that, there was all sorts of issues that ended up happening that were not predicted. We ended up with mixed batches. The delivery schedule that was communicated with rarely matched actual deliveries. We did see deliveries that were communicated but not listed. And then we also saw what we have as a shipping delivery report from a shipping brokerage. It contained shipments that were not on the list and that showed up unbeknownst to our receiving team. And then the packing list that did come with the deliveries for the grid and the silk didn't include the number of rolls within each batch. So the unload, scan, and the storage was impacted significantly. So the takeaway with all this is that without the ability to predict deliveries, it makes it extremely hard to operate as a system. Not knowing what's coming in and when it's coming in is an extreme challenge. So then that moved us into looking at, okay, well, if we can't understand the way what's showing up and when it's showing up, let's take a look at the trailers when they do show up and try to standardize and create some process around that. And as you can see through the pictures, unloading the individual rolls were extremely labor intensive. And then finding those individual roll numbers on the packing list was extremely labor intensive. And so what that means is that, with the current way the packing list is, and without that understanding of creating a batch summary, which would give us the yardage within those batches, we have to continue to scan those individual rolls into an Excel spreadsheet. And so what that means is that we're constantly looking through the individual roll numbers to try to marry that up, because we don't know when we're pulling those fabrics out, when the beginning is and when the end is to move to the next batch. What makes that hard is that then it's unpredictable of how we have to stage it, and we're constantly kind of looking at a needle in a haystack in order to continue the process. So the takeaway with this is that the prediction here is knowing how much and what you are looking for, and not being able to stop and start the scanning all at the same time. So here's a slide about the customer chain. And so with this, my understanding was, by bringing a cross-functional team together, there's a better understanding of what and how something happens, and can help to understand the trigger points of process and opportunity for improvement, and the ability to unlearn, learn, and relearn, all while understanding and developing as we go. There was another quote on my mind map that I would always go back to, that transformation is discontinuous and there are no separate systems. It's always a continuum. So back highlighted earlier when we were looking at the organization viewed as a system, I had highlighted one of the core processes of a material and supplier management. One of the tools that we are implementing now is what's called a SIPOC. So even though the SIPOC fails to show the interdependencies in process, what it does allow for is an understanding of the functions of those actions and the key tasks, triggers, and inputs, which then can create that structure that determines the behavior. For example, on the bottom left of the input, you'll see a made to stock and made to order inventory targets. By developing this process of a min and a max levels and inventory targets and reorder points, it's going to allow for better prediction of what we need, when we need it, and how much to expect, which will then give better visibility to our purchasing team, our warehouse team, our receiving team. Again, with the reminder that, leadership is learning and indispensable of each other. An example of one of the 3 questions that I did was, trying to bring in some of the transformation and the changes that were happening during this transition and this transformation, and asking these 3 basic questions. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that it changes an improvement? And what moves can we make that will result in an improvement? So our aim with this was a warehouse layout designed around process and functions and interactions between those functional areas that occupy it. So you can see the example, on the right-hand side of a sticky note process that we're turning into electronic format. How will we know that it changes an improvement as we work towards finalizing this? Areas are clear and free of debris and unneeded items. Pathways are clearly marked. Handling a movement between function is no more than a couple times, and the footprint of the area will be reduced. Lastly, for what moves can we make that will result in an improvement? What we try to do with these 3 basic questions is we try to get over at least 7 different moves. As we go through this, we start to understand, the whys and some of the causes that will be needed in order for that to be an improvement. So the one that I would like to highlight here is conduct the red tag events around cleaning and organizing and the current items in the warehouse. So the first step with this is that, with working through the teams in the warehouse, is we needed to clear an area, to be able to put things. We had noticed that there was items from other departments that had been scattered all over the warehouse and in different storage forms. So we wanted to bring that all into one place so that we could then have some conversations around it. For a redesign of the warehouse, an event like this affords the opportunity to gather what may be scattered and or forgotten. And it highlights the need for discussions and decisions to be made in a timely manner. By understanding key decisions made by other departments and the functions of the interactions of those decisions, proactive planning can take place to minimize any unwanted impact and prepare for any overflow needed. So as you can see on the left-hand side now, we've got those items all in one spot instead of all over the warehouse. And you can see the items are free and clear from debris. Harry, if you're still on, just a heads up, fabrics are going to be next. Here's a slide of the Teach to Learn. Overall, I did 47 Teach to Learn sessions with 29 individuals. Those are just the ones that I documented. As I talk about the main themes that stand out, revolving around the interactions. So far, they've been based around the operational standpoint. However, as part of this academy, there was also the human side of what interactions mean, the human-centric element, and by definition of what an interaction is, two people talking and conversing and having a conversation, stretching ourselves and stretching ourselves outside of our own comfort zones, outside of the space that we see around us, and gaining a perspective that may not normally be there. When presented with this part of the academy, I took a strategic approach. I purposely looked for and wanted have variation between the different roles and the different capacities, and take it as an opportunity to learn and grow and develop through these conversations. Understanding what profound knowledge means, not just to myself, but for others, and to gain their perspective and their understanding of it and how it may apply in one fashion or the next, will start to plant these seeds and allow us to all grow together. It reminds me of something one of our guest presenters, David Langford, had said, we are all the top of something. And having that mindset going into these conversations allowed me to really, understand the influence that others, not just within my own network, really can have on the impact of our organization as a system. I wanted to highlight, although it was really tough, some of my Teach to Learns. So for an appropriate course of action, talking to Lisa, our Chief Operations Officer, was one of my favorites, since there was a reminder that taking chances and risks to try something new and learning from it was all right, and that the guidance from her that you don't need to know everything before taking that chance. In terms of project scope, I need to change this to say one of the aha moments was when I was talking to Brett, our Vice President of Manufacturing, just through dialogue, and realized that I needed to work through steps in an incremental way instead of solving and then only focusing on the root cause. For customers, personas, and narratives, and from Laura Lee, the director of our marketing team, one insight I gained is that the narrative matters a whole lot, meaning the end user of our garments has a different narrative than what we may consider the end user or target audience of our social media presence. By understanding the narrative from both lenses, we can leverage our base and drive a more targeted approach that extends the reach of one specific audience and can live in an area where those stories and experiences overlap, creating a more harmonious platform to spread our story. When we went through the structure and determines behavior, I met with Jessica, who's our Senior Manager of Vocational Rehabilitation. And from Jessica, I learned what made it so meaningful was that even though we don't work directly with each other, we both shared the same perspective on some of the greatest structure limitations beyond just one line of business, and how when parts of the system are designed the way they are now, competition influences more than cooperation, even when that wasn't the intent. And then with progress and meaningful work, from Kristen, one of the vocational services coordinators, when looking at progress and setbacks, part of the conversation pivoted to cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps individuals who may feel stuck or with limited options or moves to adjust and figure out a plan for progress to be made. By applying some of these strategies as a leader, it may set the path forward for some and specifically bring more joy as an individual then views their leader as caring and compassionate for taking the time to truly understand any barriers and setbacks that are getting in the way. So my IQI Academy experience, what I learned was that over time, my three basic questions evolved. The scope of projects at times felt overwhelming, and as each step forward with those questions, the scope was limited so that more moves could be made. And as some of my cohorts have already alluded to, the pace was very difficult at times. The PDSAs were also too big at first. As you could see through some of those early ones, we would hit a mark. And one thing to point out is that in a PDSA, the very last part of that is the A, which is either adopt, adapt, or abandon. And so numerous times throughout this, I had to make that move that, we would either have to adopt it in a certain way that led to different red beads, that were getting in the way. And then I embraced every conversation. For those on this phone call that know me, I really took the time to active listen and to understand the point of view from all of you. And then part of this journey, it was difficult to apply at times. When we had a transitional phase here within manufacturing, while at the same time we were transforming. So being able to align those two things up in a way that we didn't overextend ourselves was a challenge at times. So the ways that this experience have differed from others that I've had: interactions. There's a huge focus on that. And by understanding that it's not just departments, there's an organization of a system behind it, real change and improvements can be made. And then the aim of the system, when we're all working towards something with the same goal, progress and improvement can be made. And then also predicting then moving. Often at times we just want to go and do without actually putting some thought behind and making some predictions around, what do we expect to happen? Where are the impacts going to be? And what are we going to do when we get there in order to pivot with purpose? And then underlying assumptions. There was part of this academy that really stuck out when we were learning about this, and it was an example of a father with his child and a milkshake. And the reason that I bring this up is that companies were trying to understand, we have to make a milkshake better. It's got to taste better. What are the ingredients? But the point of that is they never asked that father what they wanted, and that father really wanted the experience of what that milkshake meant. It didn't matter the taste. It didn't matter the amount of ingredients in it. It mattered that experience that he was going to have. And part of this academy and this journey and all the interactions that I've had was that experience in itself. And then intrinsic motivation, being able to understand that we as individuals all want to have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And no matter what we do, that can be on the ground in the boots level, all the way up to the top and the people making the decisions, that there's meaning in work and that motivation is different for all individuals. One of the other themes that stood out in numerous conversations that I had through my Teach to Learns was a creative space for idea generation. Emily, for an example, that was the big component of that. Being able to have a safe place that we can all just brainstorm and then take action around it is something that we can really work to achieve together as a group. And then the other things, as you can see through the rest of my presentation, were the 3 basic questions: the PDSA cycles, Teach to Learns, organization as a system, and understanding variation. So on my calendar for next actions, my learning, I submitted this. There's some more that came up, so I'll just add to this, Erik. Focus times. On Fridays, I've already subscribed to Chris's, who's on here, I believe, his blog of Digestible Deming. We met with Bernadette Peters on Wednesday, and she's got some as well that I'm going to be subscribing to, and I want to be able to take that moment to learn and continue, this experience in that realm. As for my project, there's weekly cross-functional redesigns meetings. What's great about that is that now that's taking shape in terms of a project side of it and a process side of that. And so we'll be able to break those meetings up with a more focused approach so that we can accomplish both at the same time. Also, as you've seen through the descriptions of the grid and the silk and some of the material and the receipt of that, a visit so that, not just understanding our own internal processes, but understanding external processes as well. As for my organization, scheduling a daily management stand-up meeting, the purpose of this is going to be able to meet with individuals from different departments all together, that we can, understand and provide the expectation and predictions for what the work's going to look like for the week, what the expectations are, and then any safety concerns that we have around that. And then finally, a tour of a GM plant. With this, it's understanding their practice of daily management. How does it look for them, and what can we bring and learn in preparation for what we've already done here, what we're starting to do next week, to see, a fully integrated daily management system is going to reap tremendous rewards for me. Lastly, as you have seen and heard what I have learned over the course of the last 4 months, I hope and my intent is that you all have also learned something, for together with learning as a basis, real and meaningful change and improvement can really take shape and take hold. Thank you all today for your time. That's it.
Erik, thank you very much. That was excellent. One of the things that stands out in your approach is you're reaching out to other people, and you're a lifelong learner. And the fact that you've reached out to Chris's blog and talked with Bernadette, you probably are one of the more active people in requesting one-on-one sessions. I appreciate the work that you did doing that and reaching out, and helped me learn as well along the way. So thank you. Ashley Winston is our next presenter. Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. My name is Ashley Winston. I'll be presenting my capstone presentation this morning. I'm a research assistant too with LabCorp Drug Development here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And today I'll be presenting some of the things, the concepts and teachings that I learned throughout the academy, starting with some of the things that were challenging for me. So some of the things I faced coming into the IQI Academy was learning to prioritize my workday by implementing having to attend class every morning at 8 a.m., completing all assignments on time, all while making sure to complete all my study work and special team assignments in the lab. I'm also learning how to apply the concepts learned in class to my daily responsibilities here at LabCorp, and learning how to scale down some of my ideas to think smaller to achieve incremental changes of improvement. The next slide. As far as some of the resistance that I faced, my experiences included asking for help over the period of time that the course took place, and letting go of some of my responsibilities with my study work, and having to forego some of the technical trainings and skills that we do in the lab, so that I could commit fully to the success of completing the course. Some of the ways that I responded to my challenges and my impulses to resist included having to lean on my team and manager for support, in which they were more than accommodating. So thanks, Team Clinton and friends. I also had to depend on other colleagues, close friends, and family when completing certain assignments like our Teach to Learns. In which by doing this, it resulted in further breaking down of a lot of the concepts learned in class to help give me a better understanding of those concepts while learning from class slides, as well as the perspectives of some of my partners. The extent of my willingness to commit to the success of this course included requesting constant support from others. I repeatedly needed to ask for help, which was the most challenging for me. For example, asking to borrow a pen from someone once is okay, but having to return every day to ask for another writing utensil or pen was a little bit challenging, but I was more than willing to do it to commit to the course. Also accepting some of that same support again from my team and others at the time where resources were limited, and it kind of made some of our study workload challenging. And lastly, learning with and from other colleagues during the course and where we helped and supported each other. What I consider the requirement to make a meaningful improvement is knowing that I have the knowledge and expertise to identify opportunity of improvements within a system and the authority to actually make real change. My process for learning and gaining knowledge included learning by doing, which was proved to be challenging at times throughout the course for me throughout the academy. The quote, "Being willing is not enough, we must do" by Leonardo da Vinci really stood out in support of this idea for me. Also, learning through my unexpected results was the best teacher for me. Unexpected results only in the sense of my predictions didn't come to pass allowed a lot of growth for me. It's a part of the process. I learned that you have to get it wrong in order to get it right. Miles Davis quote states, "When you hit a wrong note, it's the next note that you play that determines if it's good or bad. Do not fear mistakes, there are none." Applying my exercises, tools, methods to my project taught me how to organize make predictions, create plans, execute a to-do list, and study my results. This resulted in me learning from my mistakes to create a new plan of action. These tools also taught me to apply the concepts of changing a system in incremental steps for a better success rate than trying to make larger changes within a system. I'm sorry. In the beginning of the course, the aim for my project centered around how I could improve standard vehicle preps here at LabCorp for all teams by creating reference materials such as Excel documents or guides to help some of the technicians bridge any knowledge gaps for more supportive or successful drug prep experiences. But I was soon introduced into several concepts of making moves, or the correct way to make moves to achieve this, such as first identifying the areas within our systems that can be improved, answering 3 basic questions, which helped me learn to create goals I could measure if the change was good or not. And then learning to create PDSA cycles to help implement those changes or moves. So identifying some of the areas of the improvement, you go to the next slide. I first learned how to create like flow charts, such as the one here in this example. This flow chart displayed a specific system we use here at LabCorp that uses a collaborative process that requires several hands to create a final product before reaching our clients. These kind of flow charts allow for me to identify where areas of change or implementing the change would be most effective. Learning to answer the 3 basic questions. So in the beginning, my aim started with trying to make these large, massive moves, massive changes by creating these documents to be utilized for tools for the vehicle preps. I was trying to include what we would call several off-limit words. I was unsuccessful at making measurable moves of improvement, and I had to learn how to scale down my aim to accomplish incremental changes. But after going through the course, I was able to improve my responses. So I was eliminating those off-limit words. I had a more clear understanding of smaller moves to accomplish my aim, and I could state the specificity that is needed to be able to determine if an improvement was produced or not. So for my PDSA plan, learning to do that was a little bit challenging. It took a little while, but each step required specificity. So learning that the intentions of the PDSA cycles were to improve something and not change it entirely at one time, and understanding all factors of planning took time. I didn't have a very good concept of how to actually make a plan, but throughout the course, including things such as creating flow or bubble charts, what in the system worked versus what wasn't working, and what kind of data I should be collecting that would be most beneficial to creating actual change. When learning the creative plan, the first step had to include who, what, when, where, and how, which I didn't understand this entirely. So my initial PDA cycles reflected me trying to make larger changes, such as creating those Excel files that would be put, like my idea was like to put them on all the computers for all the staff to use for formulations, which was difficult to evaluate a success and wasn't really an achievable goal. I started trying to make, and then also learning to make a prediction about the outcome of my results before I executed the due portion of a PDSA. I had to make predictions based off observations from only a few of our technicians, which wasn't very good data to support any of my predictions. But again, after going through the course, eventually I was able to gain a better understanding of this concept each time I applied a cycle. Each step within the cycle became clear to me and allowed me to eventually execute my PDSAs cycles with a better direction to affect the actual change. How I experienced the Academy early on, again, managing my time to complete all my assignments accurately and on time and complete all my study work brought a lot of challenges. And I wasn't always confident that I would successfully learn as much as I wanted to learn and needed to learn throughout the Academy. But After going through it, I've gained so much more confidence in my ability to maximize my time and workload, and was able to enjoy more of the daily assignments, such as our Teach to Learns with my colleagues and friends, that allowed me to gain more in-depth understanding of concepts so that I could apply them. These are a few of the ways that this experience has differed from others that I've had. IQI Academy learning experiences differed by forcing me to think what we call outside the box. We had to complete several activities before concepts were even taught, which was challenging sometimes. Learning some of those abstract concepts and then learning how to apply them to our world of science here at LabCorp was always interesting. And applying those same concepts in a way that I could create the most effective changes to any given system within or even outside of LabCorp. Things that I've done during the academy that I've not done elsewhere was learning with coworkers from different departments or even different positions. Also implementing concepts the same day as we learn them, and then learn with and from other individuals from other companies. My next actions in my learning, what I'd like to do is utilize a lot of the skills that I've gained here throughout the academy to apply them to our application and interview processes in the near future, hopefully, and also prepare for future career opportunities in people management. As far as my project, I'd like to continue running PDSA cycles and encouraging others to do so as well to affect the most change within my organization. I'm also joining some of the after-hour work team. And then lastly, for my overall organization, I'd like to present the capstone presentation for some of our lunch and learns, and even possibly be a mentor to any future Academy participants from LabCorp. Thank you to my network of individuals who logged in this morning. A special thank you to my manager, Sarah, and Team Clinton for your continued support. All of my cohorts at the organization for introducing me to the course, as well as our instructor, Erik. Thank you for your dedication to teaching me.
Thank you, Ashley. One of the things that impressed me about your work is how you have reached out to people, not only around LabCorp, but across the country. You have a broad network of people that you interact with on a regular basis. And so it's impressive that you share with, talk with, and learn from those people. So that's a wonderful example for us. Thank you very much, and good job today. Ian Gerken is our next presenter. Good morning, Ian.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Gerken, and I work for LabCorp Drug Development Division as a Research Associate 2. I joined the IQI Academy as a way to further my development for my team lead and to strengthen my skills within the company as an influencer. So one of the big things in this class is learning about yourself. And one of the big takeaways is learning your personal strengths and weaknesses is the best way to strengthen yourself as a person and as a leader. So one of the things I struggled with the most is the teach to learns. I'm very introverted and I like to work independently. So that meant that I was having to drag people into conversations that I necessarily wasn't going to seek out by myself. So that was definitely one of my challenges, especially then inviting people with whom I didn't have a strong relationship to discuss abstract topics. I resisted this at first and stuck pretty much only to my team and my friends within the company. But then as time went on, I realized that one of the big benefits of this was broadening your network, and teaching people other topics within this course will help spread the change. And so then I began to branch out. And I learned to overcome this simply by persevering. I put aside my feelings and focused on the task. Putting aside my fears kind of helped me realize that I needed to enact change within the organization by being selfless and not worrying about what I want to do or what I want to do, and just being a leader, I guess. I began to enjoy the learning process that came through teaching others, and enjoyed valuing their feedback and their different perspectives. I learned that an improvement is most effective when it's intentional. The best improvements will come from a change that is deliberate in its planning, contemplative in its study results, and decisive in its way to implement those results. I learned that there is only one correct way to learn. All learning stems from a foundation of prior knowledge, and that knowledge is experience plus application. I learned that knowledge is not simply information, but how you interpret that information and enact it. In order to properly implement these changes, you need to have both a high-level view and a deep understanding. If you're too deep into the weeds, you might miss the big picture, but by being on the court and making moves, you are less likely to miss the nuances that come with the job to be done. So one of the big things we learned was that a system is a series of interconnected parts that all work towards a shared aim. We learned that the system diagram, as shown in this slide, is the best way to view a system rather than a hierarchical organization. Because when you have a hierarchy, you're less likely to see all of the inputs needed, and you're more likely to get stuck within your silo. It's important to think about that the final product of, in my case, a final report can't exist without every single one of the departments pictured here. As I started making this diagram, I began to picture and think about all of the programs, the electronic programs and everything, the consumable items that I use on a daily basis that are required to complete my job, but that the client doesn't necessarily see, but that doesn't make them any less important to the final product. I learned that it's important to view the system as interconnected parts, because with this web style diagram, it's easy to see all of the interconnections and all of the different inputs that you need to do your job. One of the important things that we learned was that if a system is not fully functioning, or if a system is fully functioning, each department doesn't necessarily have to have a positive result in and of itself if the overall system is positively impacted. And one of the ways that that was applied to my project was in regards to our facilities department, who handles most of our receiving. They agreed to take on a more in-depth role in our receiving process to save the remainder of operations time and effort while doing the same thing. And it also made me think about department-specific budgets that seem to be present in most organizations and the use it or lose it mentality that comes with it. So a single department might not necessarily have a need, but if they don't use their budget, they might not have the same budget next year, whereas they could share that with a department that has met their budget, but it does have a pressing need. Another thing that helped me visualize what we were doing and how it impacted my current job was the customer chain and the job to be done. Because each department is working towards a shared aim doesn't necessarily mean that their job is going to be the same. The job to be done by each link within the chain is likely going to be different. But even though the job is different, the aim is still the same, and the system will work best when every link within the chain keeps the system aim in mind. So another thing that became obvious was that one department's output is another department's input, which means that makes them the next chain's customer. For example, when I write my report, my customer is the next level report reviewer, and then their customer then becomes the next level report reviewer. And so the customer chain doesn't necessarily stop as soon as you hand off your report, but it continues down the line. And that includes when I hand off my final report to the client. Then there is still yet another invisible part of the chain, in that it goes to the client, who sends it to a governmental agency or even the cancer patients themselves. And then for the system to work, all of the links in the chain need to understand their role and who their customer is, even if they're not on the end of the chain. In consideration of who your customer is can help ensure that your focus is in the right place. So by writing this out, I realized that each link is very important and is required to get the final product out into the customer. So one of the big things that we performed during this class was the Teach to Learn conversations. And one of the big ideas behind the Teach to Learn is to create a web. So the transformation of a system cannot be done by an individual alone. It's required that everyone buys in. So while you are teaching your conversation or teaching your material for the day, while it provides a review and helps to sink in the material, it also expands your knowledge by incorporating other viewpoints and creating a network of change. And you kind of began to see this when I heard other people who I spoke with Teach to Learns begin to use those same phrases from the class when they weren't even in the class. So I began to see that the change was spreading. And each Teach to Learn conversation can be viewed as a ripple. If both parties buy into the transformation, they can begin to spread the ripple to the next person. So my project was revolving our shipping receipt. Our current process involved basically anybody who is closest by the receiving dock to send out a notification to all of in vivo operations, which can create a lot of unnecessary emails, which can lead to wasted time for the company. So one of the exercises that we did was a flowchart to visualize our process, including key steps and stakeholders. So by mapping out the process using this deployment flowchart, you're able to see the process in its entirety and identify critical weak points. By viewing the system of package receipt as a whole, I was able to identify information that was needed to successfully complete the job to be done. So this was the foundation on which my project was built and which my changes were built. So I'll spare you my napkin math, but I calculated the amount of time spent by the company as a whole during a standard week, and then made a prediction what my change process would result in. And again, I touched on this before, but the selflessness of the facilities and their appreciation of the overall system was key to this. They were going to be spending more time under the new method, but they were willing to do that because they recognized that the overall outcome is a change for the positive for everyone else. So we began to plot control charts, which helped us to understand that variance is present in all systems, and that understanding the variation and the sources of the variations are key to making any meaningful change. Without knowing the cause of the variation, or even without recognizing the variation, the changes can lead to worse outcomes, or you might not even know that you need to change anything. So visualizing these daily tasks on a control chart can help you even recognize these variations. We learned that most variation is common cause, meaning it comes from within the system itself. And control charts can help you visualize this data and identify the differences between special causes and common causes. And to do that, you need to do analysis. And so what you see here are the plotting of the number of unique receipt emails and the number of recipients each email contained. And this gave me a good idea of the number of packages we were going to receive on any given day, and how many emails we were receiving on a given day, and how many unnecessary emails we were receiving on a given day. And so in the receipt email graph on the right, you can see that there is a data point that falls outside of our upper control limit, and that indicates a special cause event. But unfortunately, we analyzed this data point after too many days had passed. And so we had missed our chance to properly analyze the possible causes. But part of my continued study will be to continue to plot this data and hopefully catch any additional special causes at that time. So PDSA cycles were kind of how we performed and analyzed our changes. And so to do so, it's important to know the exact reason you want to make your change, which ties into the three basic questions. Knowing the end goal can help delineate possible solutions without becoming fixated on a possible single solution. And that ties back into writing out the flowchart of our process. And by viewing the whole process, you can see potential impacts by making single changes. Keeping the end goal of a single location for receipt information and reduction of receipt emails, I didn't necessarily corner myself into a single path, and gave myself many potential ways forward. Prediction of the changes of the results of my change made involved studying the current receiving process to compare to the results. And then in order to successfully complete a PDSA cycle, you have to be able to be proven incorrect. And to do that, we learned to avoid off-limits words such as fewer, less, and easier. The study portion is probably the most important part of the PDSA cycle. Without studying the results of your moves, you're not really, you're not doing yourself a good favor, because you can silo yourself into a change that hasn't necessarily reached its full potential. So without studying the results of my first PDSA cycle, I never would have realized the pain it is to type in a recipient email address and do the proper fields. So by acting on my observations, I was able to start my next PDS cycle to address the deficiencies that came from the current draft of my new shipping receiving form that you can see on this current slide. And then this, this second PDSA cycle, and the positive changes were confirmed by early test users. And then the next cycle included the addition of drop-down menus, checkboxes, and autofill options. So to further my learning, my next goals are going to be continuation of my current project, which will include a full-scale implementation. And then after full-scale implementation and testing and refinement, I would like to expand my current project, which would possibly involve the storage solution or storage conditions and possible lots, final dispositions, and other items like that that can help trace these compounds as they go through our system. As for my personal learning, I plan on rereading The New Economy with a new perspective and taking notes again based on how I learned through the class, and then further teach to learn conversations based on that reread as I gain a new appreciation. So I just wanted to thank everyone that put up with all of my teach to learns and all of my seemingly random questions. And thank you all for joining today.
Thank you very much, Ian. This is very detailed, interesting, and I appreciate your willingness to look inside and throughout the course do some things that have been uncomfortable for you and still hang in there and stick with it. We're going to be running over a few minutes. Hopefully you can stick around while we hear the final presentation from Gloria. Gloria Choi is our next and final presenter. Good morning, Gloria.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gloria, and I'm a study coordinator at LabCorp. Before I participated in IQI, I hadn't really realized the power and ability that everyone had to initiate change. And I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned these past few months. Through various assignments that encouraged me to talk to our leadership, I realized that our management is actually very receptive to process improvement and extremely supportive of staff who are willing to propose alternatives or solutions to processes within our system. So if there's one thing I'd love for everyone to take away today, it's that limits in the face of inaction are created by the individual. And as Deming states in his 14th point for management, it's everyone's job to transform the organization. So IQI taught me the importance of viewing my organization as a system, the network of interdependent components working together to achieve a single aim. Because usually we're too focused on our singular position or department, so we don't realize the effect we may have on key stakeholders in other departments when we propose change or improvement. So for example, a proposed improvement may be beneficial to one component of the system, but may bring negative effects to others. Improvements should be made with the common aim of the system in mind, not necessarily for the benefit of one specific department, as it can have a net negative impact on the system. So one tool that I found particularly useful in identifying key stakeholders to avoid impacting the system negatively is a deployment flowchart. Deployment flowcharts articulate the steps in a process while identifying all parties involved. So this was the first deployment flowchart that I created for my IQI project, but I realized the value in creating such a visual for process improvement proposals. So as you can see here, I started to create them for other projects and presentations outside of IQI, because after all, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So through my IQI project, I also learned the process to making meaningful improvements using the 3 basic questions and PDSA cycles, The three basic questions forced me to be very specific and to identify quantifiable measures of success. So for example, the box highlighted in red is my first attempt at answering these questions without any guidance, whereas the answers in the green box are my answers after only 1 week of class. My answers had become more concise and they eliminate vague, non-quantifiable words such as enforce, increase, and improve. Through my PDSA cycles, I had to come to terms with the fact that being correct about my predictions was not the goal of these improvement cycles. PDSA cycles don't really have like a clear black and white right answer. In fact, the goal of PDSA cycles is to learn. So any new observations or predictions that I may have discovered became the correct answer. By doing so, the focus of my project actually slowly shifted. I originally started my project with the goal of promoting the use of our pre-existing Outlook calendars because I had assumed a lack of reservations was what was causing a scheduling conflict for limited resources such as equipment and space. However, through my cycles, I began to realize that scheduling conflicts were not as common as I had originally assumed, and I learned the importance of identifying a tool's job to be done before improvements were made. So originally we learned about identifying one's job to be done through this customer chain exercise that you guys have all seen now, because it outlines each person's unique contributions and role in a system. So for example, the job to be done by a study manager at LabCorp is different than the job to be done by our clients at pharma companies. But both of our aims is to develop efficacious treatments for cancer patients. I actually ended up applying this concept to my project because my PDSA cycles were indicating that the job to be done by two scheduling tools that my department was using was overlapping. So for example, this table right underneath my exercise is just a quick draft of what I heard was supposed to be the intended job to be done for our two different scheduling tools. But currently the dosing book that's listed on the left is also being used to visually show capacity at each time, which is supposed to be the job of the bubble calendar. This can create confusion and repetitive work because now staff don't know which one to use in order to provide clear communication regarding their schedules. And this is an example of what happens when improvements are made without first identifying the intended job to be done of resources used. And this was super ironic because I was actually the one who proposed the improvements made to the dosing book to increase capacity visibility. So basically I shot myself in the foot like 6 months before IQI. So I finally got to see what happens when one makes improvements with and without IQI knowledge. Aside from all these lessons on process improvement in the organization, IQI has also taught me a lot about myself. I found out that I learn best when I actively try to apply concepts to my daily work, and I enjoyed the Teach to Learn assignments as they helped me to facilitate unique conversations with my coworkers that introduce new ideas. This ended up being a little dangerous for me though, because through these discussions, I got overzealous and rapidly filled up my plate with a plethora of projects. I learned that I have a difficult time prioritizing when I get too passionate about certain projects and can lose track of time. Thankfully, my style of work hasn't been a huge barrier to my current position, but I have found that it's not compatible with the tight deadlines that I encountered through IQI. IQI was extremely fast-paced and assignment heavy, which was super challenging for me. So I found myself doing the bare minimum for certain assignments just to get through them. However, I think I had a unique experience that also allowed me to maximize my IQI experience because my study coordinator position is based on process improvement and development. So I was given a lot of freedom by my manager and our group leads to apply the concepts that I was learning to almost any process that I was passionate about at the time. Sorry, you can actually move on another slide. So here are some of my next few steps that I had in mind for my learning. The first is to reread Deming's The New Economics by the end of this month to see if I read it a little bit differently now that I've participated in IQI. Additionally, as a bookworm, I've kind of been eyeing a few books that Erik has been suggesting to us throughout our sessions. And so I'm planning on starting 6 Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono, as it's advertised as the multi-million best-selling guide to running better meetings and making faster decisions. Regarding my project, I would like to redo my control chart to quantifiably identify if I have a stable system and create a template for our Outlook calendar so that they contain more consistent information. And then lastly, for my organization, I hope to continue to help promote a culture of transformation by following up with all the projects that I've started in the past few months and to make sure that improvement is continuous. And I'll also offer a Q&A session with LabCorp participants for the next session of IQI to help provide accurate insight into what to expect and hopefully tips that will make their session a little less challenging. So thank you so much for making the time to attend our presentations, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Gloria, that was great. I fully support your last action there. In fact, if you want any help with that, I'll be glad to assist. I like that idea a lot. Helping people prep for the next academy is a good objective. And your approach to learning and doing and then taking on more is interesting, insightful, and could be overwhelming, but I think you've managed it quite well. So thank you very much. Thank you to each of our presenters today. At the beginning of our session, I asked, how does one learn to become a more effective leader of people, of processes and systems, of changes that produce quality improvements? This morning, we've had an opportunity to see and hear demonstrations of how our Academy participants have become better leaders. One of the best ways to learn leadership is to lead. One of the best ways to develop future leaders is to give people opportunities to lead. Small-scale improvement projects are proven methods of identifying and developing the leadership capabilities of people at all levels of your organization. Dr. Deming was a lifelong learner. I watched him make notes to himself about things he was learning as he taught his own 4-day seminars. He continued to learn until his final days. When we learn, we become a beginner again. I thank each of our presenters today for putting themselves into the role of beginner throughout the duration of this academy. I commend their commitments to continuing to be learners and to making a difference in their organizations. I highly recommend that you commit to becoming a beginner again and join us on January 18th for the next IQI Academy. Take that next step and register today. Thank you for joining us today. Please stay in touch. Have a good rest of your day and a safe, healthy weekend, and bye for now.